Good morning. I'm Desiree Dubois, founder of An Empowered Woman in Homework. And homework is where you can live where you work where you live, anywhere in the world. And what we do is we acquire luxury style homes and we build out the bedrooms, we live work suites for women professionals and entrepreneurs, and they can live there full time, part time, or as a drop in. And every Wednesday morning, we meet for coffee and conversations. We present some of our members who share their best products, programs, and services to our community of women professionals that want to know and need to know this information. And this morning, I'm happy and excited to introduce Pat Lynch. We've been connected for how long, Pat? Years.
More than 25
10,
years now.
25 years ago. You're aging me. Nobody knows that I'm that old.
The time passes when you're having a good time.
Yes, we have. And it's funny because I initially was introduced to her because I was using her program called Audio Acrobat. How many people remember Audio Acrobat? And when we use different services, we asked for people to, we finally got contacted the owners of it and have them participate, either sharing on our podcasts that we were doing for, again, 20 years plus ago and things of that type. So, but I didn't know is that Pat Lynch served as a press secretary for a US senator and a member of Congress. And that she started at the age of 25, she began her advertising, marketing, PR, and media company, and solely by a woman in the South. And she was serving companies, organizations, and political campaigns. And now she owns Women's Online Media and Education Network. And they produce, streaming sites for women's radio. And then also for this Audio Acrobat, which is a company she founded over 15 years ago. So she started a new program called discoverwealth.com. And it's currently in the soft launch. So she's going to tell us all about it. So good morning, Pat. How are you? Thank you for joining us. What are you up to?
That's right. Well, you give me space over COVID and I was creating, how it is. So we created 2 new services, and now we're also going to create a new site for women's radio with new services. And I think I'll just start there and kind of launch in a little bit. But women's radio really came from my strong inner desire to find my path as opposed to anybody else's. Or it's not like I didn't love what I did, because I was in advertising and PR, and I really enjoy it. I love coming up with ideas and seeing them help people get their goals accomplished. And so that's just a tool in the toolbox, but those are the tools that I really, really enjoy. And so I actually was given women's radio in a vision and told that women need to learn to speak up, to the point that someone had mentioned, was it Don? Who was it?
Senway.
I mentioned that it's really, really important during this large time period for women to learn to speak up. It's not just to, and the only way, when I was younger, I tended to be a very angry person. I didn't think about that much, but maybe I had good cause, but the only way I could really get my truth out was I had to have a lot of power behind it just to say what I really thought. And I came to realize that wasn't a very effective way to communicate. So I started learning a few skills, but it is really important for women to learn to say what they have to say in a good way, so that eventually, hopefully, or what I was shown was that we'll actually learn to communicate better and work with the guys. And the guys will also learn, because we've managed to speak up, and we will actually be able to co-create much better and come up with solutions that will allow us to live in a happier world. So that's the really short version. So how that manifests, of course, it could have been a lot of different ways. But I started by trying to do radio in what most people would consider like the real or the normal way. But this was actually before the internet got started. So I actually began thinking about this and getting these ideas in 1995. In 1996, when we began, the internet still really wasn't on. You had something called a BBS, a bulletin board service. I don't know if you guys that or not. And so we actually began by creating a program that we pushed up to the satellite, and then it beamed down. And so once we got that much done, then I would get up really early in the morning and call from the East Coast all the way over to the West Coast and call on radio stations and also potential advertisers, so that we could have continuing income and have more and more radio stations. And I will tell you that that work to some extent paid off, because within 30 days we had 35 affiliates, and we were on course to have 2 major advertisers. And on the 31st day, Congress, in their infinite wisdom, passed the 1996 Telecommunications Act. And that opened the floodgates for all the big boys to come in and buy and sell radio and TV and everything else. And so no one wanted to hear about new programming, even though we got it off the ground, just barely, but in a really good way, actually. So all the doors closed and we had to take it off. It was really discouraging, but the vision didn't say quit if this doesn't, if it doesn't really pan out, you can go do something else. Nope. So we had to look for another way. We spent 2 years, did a lot of research, and decided, well, maybe we should buy a station. I'm telling you all this for a reason, needless to say. So details. But no, the boys wouldn't sell us a station, but one company, which ended up becoming Clear Channel, agreed to lease us a station, which is very seldom done. And we figured out the numbers and thought we could do it. So we agreed. But then they said, but you still have to get it cleared with the boss, who was a real good old boy from Texas, who came in and he said, well, little lady, if I thought you really had something, I'd blow up a station and do it myself. But I'm a very busy person, so we're not going to do that. And so in the space of one conversation, 2 years of work went right down the drain. But the vision didn't say to quit. So we looked around for where we could go, and streaming was just beginning. You guys probably aren't familiar with a big what do you call those things? A conference and expo called AdTech. But I had kept up with this, and it started out in just one little room in a hotel in San Jose, California. But I could see streaming coming along. So I talked with my partner and said, I think, we should just move to the web. We have no place else to go, and look into streaming. That might work. So when I finally, with a bunch of volunteers and chewing gum and Scotch tape, put our first website together, streaming literally was a baby. Nobody even used streaming, and it was vastly expensive. And I just barely got a real website, and that's just about the same time that what's called the GUI interface began. So you can see things like you can now. It wasn't just a bunch of words going down the page. And at that point, women only made up 3% of all the people on the web, just 3%. But in 1 year, mainly because of that woman at AOL, it moved from 3% to 40% in 1 year.
Wow.
So by the end of the next year, 40% women on the web. And one reason that happened is because women's organizations like yours, Desiree, began to teach people that it was cheaper and better to use email to communicate than to try and send out newsletters, which is what a lot of women's organizations had done before them. So this is this is history. And by the way we got the streaming credits is my husband, by happy accident, had gone to a program where Steve Ballmer had given the talk. And David went up to meet him, and Steve was just wasn't yet then the president of Microsoft. And he gave David, my partner, his card and said, if you ever need anything, just call me directly. Oh, nice. So David had it in, a very special place. So when we got this far, I said, David, why don't you call just to see what might be done, So David sent an email, and they wrote right back. And the result of that is that we got streaming credits at the time. And I couldn't have done it any other way. And a lot of software. It was just a miracle. So that's actually how we got off the ground. And I would have to say a lot of grace, a lot of perseverance. And so what I was given, I thought must be worthwhile. And we're still doing this thing. So we want to make some improvements. So we're going to start this new site. It's going to have a podcast directory, or that's the intention. And we've checked everything out. So I'm pretty sure that I won't have to go back on that. And that will be so that all these wonderful women who have podcasts will at least have one place where people can go and look for women's podcasts in lots of different areas. So I'm very excited about that. We're also more than likely going to begin doing new programs as well. So things that will teach in the area of communications. And so we'll, when we get more of that together, I'll come back, Desiree.
Well, that's fantastic. No, it's really interesting. And what you were saying is that one of the reasons why you got into this industry, because women didn't have a voice. And so that women's radio now is a place for women's voice, and I think that's really important for us to realize that we always didn't have. Even the other night when she said she couldn't, just 20 years ago, we couldn't get a credit card in our own name. So I think it's really beautiful to see the growth in women on the internet, also in media. So you also talk about how to make a difference when you're talking to people. I understand difference when you're talking to men, and that can be either your partners, your husband, even your sons, but also to other people. So what are some of the things that you have found that really makes a difference? And so we're putting into perspective, like if you're talking to people via podcasts, via the the radio, you're talking, there's people out there that are listening to you. So there must be some tricks or some tips that you should keep in account to make them feel that they're resonating with you the most.
Yeah, I think whether it's one-on-one or whether you're talking to a large audience or whether it's in a podcast, I think the trick is, first, I think everything comes from the inside. It comes from your own desire. And I think that you have to have a desire to want to connect with other people, really, really connect. And so I'm the kind of person who makes statements. And the other thing I had to learn was how to ask questions. So that's perfect, because that's really what you need to do when you do podcasts, or what we're doing now, exactly what you're doing, Desiree, asking the questions. And the other is to come with a real attitude of really wanting to connect and serve. I think if you do that, you can't go wrong. I mean, I think even in personal relationships, that it has always been a turn on when people really inquire sincerely about you and what you do and so forth. And I've actually learned to really enjoy that aspect of communications. And I probably, like you, I love the people that I have as guests. Even if I somehow in the back of my mind think, oh, this is not going to work out, this one's going to be a bomb, and so forth and so on. No, they turn out to be great, and part of it is because I am sincerely seeking for that unique thing in those people that I can share with my audience that will, and then you have to know your audience too. Who are you talking to? Everybody doesn't relate in the same way. I think some of those courses that teach you how to relate to people who don't have your style is really useful. I found that really useful. Everybody doesn't want to relate in the same way. You have to be quick enough to kind of pick some of that up as well. Part of the way I do that is I actually spend time with my guests before we start recording to really get to know them. Now, Desiree, you and I have known each other for 25 years, so we didn't need to do that. But when you're talking to someone you've never met before, maybe you're not even seeing them on the screen, you need some way. And so really I start from this real inner desire to get to know that person and find out what about them it is that is unique and needs to be shared. And always thinking that I know my audience really well. So if it's one-on-one, one of those ways is to ask questions, really be sincerely interested in that person. If you have a big audience, we determined who we wanted to talk to before we started women's radio. So we did a lot of research. I have a great audience. Our audience is a large audience of women leaders, just like you ladies, which is why I'm here. And but women that are roughly 40 to 65 plus. I'm not quite as old as your guest, Kay, the other, not quite, almost though. So I exceed the limit myself. But women, 51% of them are entrepreneurs. Roughly 25% of them are executives in corporations, and the remainder are leading like not-for-profits or governmental agencies or educational institutions. They're just an enormously valuable group that not only make a difference in the marketplace themselves, but influence everyone around them, their employees, their family, their community. And so it takes leaders like that to encourage other women to take the next step and to speak up and so forth and so on. So I love my audience, and I always try and introduce my guest in a way that they will feel comfortable, they will know who they're speaking to, and they will also share from their heart. And my audience will get that and they will appreciate that. So that's my hope in the work that I do.
I know one of the other things that, especially for those who are just starting, it helps with if you just pretend you're talking to one person. If you don't think about, especially if you're on radio where there's thousands, could be hundreds of thousands of people. If you just think, if I talk to you as if I'm just talking to you, we're just having a conversation in a sense that it feels intimate. The things that you would say, your gestures, even your tone and everything would be more personable, as opposed to if you go put a radio hat on or a podcast hat on and kind of speak this way, kind of approach it, see if you can approach it from that personal part. I think that's really a plus. It makes a difference in how you speak to people. So ideas, there's lots of times we have to think of ideas for our products, our programs and services. I have certain ways that I suggest the ladies find out for different topics. What are your suggestions? And then I'll share mine thereafter.
You mean what ideas for
how they come up with ideas, like for their shows, for their shows, for their shows and for the shows, for the product, for the topics, so you have a product, program, or service. So some people say, well, I've got all this, like, what am I going to talk about? How am I going to do a weekly or a monthly, or a podcast period or a radio show? They don't have the ideas. So
I think, well, starting back, if you're going to talk with anybody, you have to know who you're talking to. If you have a product, let's say, or a service, it really, really doesn't matter. Service is a product of just a different kind. Then you better fall in love with that product. You better know what makes it different and unique. If you're in love with your product, I don't care if it's yours or somebody else's. If you just think about if you had just discovered an orange and you just absolutely fell and just you could not wait to tell everybody about how delicious is it and how you can use it and so forth and so on. That's the way, that's where you have to come from. You have to fall in love with your product or service. You have to figure out everything that makes it special. When you do that, when you really fall in love with it, it just naturally comes out. There's a lady, we hardly ever do product PR, by the way, but I chose this one lady. She lives in San Francisco. After I called her to kind of explore whether I thought this would be okay for my audience or not. And she was so genuinely enthusiastic. She could explain to me every little thing that made her product amazing. And it was. And she said, I just feel like I've got the perfect product for women. It's a product that made out of silicone. I believe I have this right. I can still remember some of the details. And you can prep your food in it. You can cook your food in it. You can eat your food out of it. And you can save it and put a lid on it and save it if you didn't finish it. And then you take it out and warm it up again. And I'm thinking, bring it on, right? But she had never made anything before. She had never been in manufacturing. I think she was in computers and IT and so forth and so on. But she was so amazingly enthusiastic. And her company just went just like that, just went right off the charts. And basically from her real, true enthusiasm for her product, which she loved for herself, but which she also could see could help a lot of other women in particular. I mean, and men who can't cook, how's that? But it takes that kind of enthusiasm.
So you have the enthusiasm. So say, for example, we've worked with people that are architects, or one lady is an ophthalmologist, and she's thinking about doing a radio show or a podcast series. Now, when I say, let's use for both of them are the same, online media. All right. So she says, well, what am I going to talk about? So some of the things I suggest to them is that for them to Google the most commonly asked questions about that topic or that product or about that problem, that it's solving, whatever your situation is solving. And with those questions, those are the questions that Google has, and those are the questions that are going in. So Google being the number one information source, that can give them the topics, and then they can take those topics and break it down. So say, for example, the topic could be about, again, ophthalmologist, how do I select my glasses? So that could be like one, but you can also take each part of it and break it down. And the reason why I'm saying that is because some people don't do podcasts or radio shows because they don't know what they're going to talk about. So since you have a radio program, I want to be able to give them other ideas. I'm like, hey, you have one of our ladies have art shop, right? So I could, Regina has art. So I say to her, okay, she's got she could take some of her art and talk about the process of the art, the materials that she used, the ingredients, whatever those ingredients are, and the process, how she did it with a sponge, or whether she did it with the brush, whether she did whatever. I mean, so they just want to be able to get some ideas on what they do, because the more ideas they have, then the more people will be able to do a podcast and do a video. And then also I say that it doesn't have to be all yours either. Bring in other people all the time, which is what I did. I brought in other, like yourself, I bring in other people all the time. Even if it's something that I already know about, I'll bring in other people for the purpose of just making it interesting, different voices, different perspectives, and different things. So you've seen women doing all kinds of radio shows. What are some of the things they talked about?
Well, let me speak to what you were talking about. I think, and what I tell my guests, and this is what I do, I think that's a little different. Well, I think have you seen my guest form that we created?
Yes.
And so one of the things that we do that's somewhat different is that we tell our guests, please give us 3 questions that you would most like to be asked, because when anyone does speak at all, they're just like sitting there waiting, and really women worry about what people might ask them. Oh my God, I don't think I could do that. I don't know what they might ask me. Oh goodness. But the truth is, if they are the ones that present the questions, that helps. So we ask them to give us the questions, and I pretty much expect them to give me questions that they have most often been asked. What do other people find interesting in your product or service? What kind of questions, and how has that led to the people discovering your product or service? And even better is just give me an example. Tell me a story about someone who's used your product or service and how that made a difference in their life, because your audience only wants to know one thing, and that is, what's in it for me? So I don't care what you know about the product. If you're not relating that to what the audience really wants to know, and you don't know what the audience wants to know, you haven't done your homework. And because they want, and they don't want to hear you say, well, we've been in business for 25 years and we've done this and this and this. And people think, boring. So they really want to know how it's really, really helped other people. And in that regard, part of the sharing that we do is to bring all these fabulous women and their amazing ideas. Uh-oh, I have a problem. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Well, I was able to hear you. You may have frozen for a minute. So if you can hear me, you may have to go out and come back in. So if I don't have a joke for the audience, then I know Dawn does. Anyway, Pat, if you have to go out and come back in, that's it. So ladies, so those of you who are thinking about starting a radio show or starting a podcasts being very popular, and then the radio show is different about hers, though she has an audience, just like some of you who may have taken the Blog Talk Radio program with me, where it has an audience. Well, what's good for her is, let me change this out, is that she has an audience that has an audience. So go to womensradio.com and just see what's there and see how, what's there and all the different other women's there. So at least you have your audience. Sorry, she went right off. She'll be right back. Okay. And you have an audience. So it's another option to be able to get your merch, especially if you want something consistent. And the same audio, and I'll ask her this question when she comes on, can we use the same audio for her radio show that we can use for a podcast? That would be, that way you just say it once and then be able to get another market for it. Or some of you just may want to be specifically on her audio. But think about some questions. If you have questions, put it in the chat. Think about what your radio show, your podcast would be about, and also what your name would be and what problem you'll be solving, what your format will be. We've talked before about formats where they're, let's see, make sure I don't miss her when she comes back. Where the formats where you can be interview style, that's one format, or a format where you can be informational style, where you just go on and you give information. There's also a formats where people now are giving commentary on different shows, commentary on politics, commentary on different things that are happening, what's happening. There's entertainment type shows where there's, music, or people are, presenting different artists. Presenting different, just all the different types of things. And it doesn't even have to be you. If it's something that you just want to do, you can be able to create a platform where you can bring on these different people and line them up and do it. But I think the most important thing is, before doing that, it's all fun, it's all wonderful, and it's all great. What's your why? Like, why would you be doing this? Why would you be creating a radio show or a podcast? What do you want your end result to be? There she is. How are you?
Oh, sorry.
That's
I
okay.
love technology.
We missed you.
We did. We missed you. I didn't get to the jokes yet, but that was good. That was the good news.
Well, I don't know what I missed, but I don't want to, I'm sorry for the delay. But at any rate, one of the things you had asked me is to kind of share my point of view about the power of broadcasting. And everybody's not eager to get on something, a podcast or anything else, and share with a large number of people. I think that you need a big why in order to start using tools like broadcasting, whether it's streaming on the internet or radio or TV or whatever. And now, of course, social media is pretty broad. Yeah, I think you could probably put social media into broadcasting, and certainly with Facebook Live and other services, you can certainly do that. People have almost, that's not entirely true, but forgotten about radio and TV. Yeah, they still have ideas about it, but they're huge audiences. We don't have enough time to meet people. We can't even get out to meet people. This is so this version that we're using now is a form of broadcasting, and it allows us
Oh,
to talk to many, many, many more people than we. I think most believe deep in their soul, but then they don't really they don't practice it. Is that there's power in your voice. So starting from the inside, which is part of the reason I shared some of the things about how I began, is that you have to tell the truth. So part of the truth is like the truth of your product or service. That's part of it. You have to tell the real truth of the things that are deep inside and that are the real reasons why you do it or why anyone else would want to do it or use it or experience it or any of those ways of explaining things. It has to be true. It has to be done. You have to use words that really communicate with people. But the real power, the motivation for people to do things comes from sound. Interestingly enough, I had a great teacher and a man who's no longer on the planet. Unfortunately, his name was Joseph Chilton Pierce. He was a child development and a human development authority, and he wrote, I don't know, 10 or 11 books, and they're all wonderful. One of his books that was the most famous, I guess, was Magical Child. And he was totally my hero. I knew him personally. I helped him, and by helping him, it taught me how to help people learn how to do interviews. So I took him around for his book programs and on radio, and he hated them because people would ask these questions, and he wanted to try and squeeze 70 years of his experience into a 3-minute interview. Just cannot be done. So I had to explain to him, as I explained to some of my guests, if you've got one idea, which is why we make people do the guest form. There's several reasons for doing that. One is better. It organizes your material far better, but it helps the guest to get their ideas centered so that they know what ideas they want to get across. And they can think ahead, just like Desiree, you and I got together ahead of time and went through things. So then when you're speaking, you can say what's true. You can say it from your heart. You can say it with power, and you can reach an enormous number of people, and you can touch their heart as well. It's the power of the voice. So whether you use that to talk to people one-on-one, or whether you use it to give speeches and talk to many people at one time, or you use it in some form of broadcasting, it gives you additional power to reach people directly at the heart level. Now, if you want to reach people at the mind level, then you would use newspapers, magazines, and television, because they come through the eyes. It reaches the frontal part of the brain for the most part, and actually what that does is to see people see if they agree with your approach. But when you hear things, that goes to the limbic system of the brain, and that's the motivating center. And that's how you can motivate people to make change. Otherwise, it's not so easy to get that change. So that's my little speech on that. That's probably more than you ever wanted to know about broadcasting.
No, we want to know about all of it. We want to know all of it. And that's really good information to know. So what would you say is the number one consideration that one should keep in mind when they're creating their message?
Always the absolutely most important number one thing is who you're speaking to. You must know your audience. You just cannot you can't make a list of all the good points of your product and service or what you think you know or whatever. You have to know your audience. And I think that once you fall in love with your audience, then you seek to pull from yourself that which will be most valuable for them. Because what does your audience want to know? What's in it for me? So when you realize these two truths, as it were, then what you're able to give to your audience will be valuable for them.
So what do you need to know about your audience? You need to know your demographics. Like I know Nancy
Sure.
the other night about your avatar. So like who is that? And what I
Yeah.
say to the ladies is that who do you want more of? You know, like who just says yes to your opportunities, who say yes to your price points, who say yes to you as a person being able to work with them. So that's what you want more of. And so who is that person?
And so another way to say that, or a marketing way to say that, is who is currently, or who do you want to buy the most of what you're selling? Who is that? And if it's 10 million people, do they pretty much kind of line up and say, yes, we're all pretty much the same here, right? You know, we all like this, we all do this, we have this kind of background, we're this old, we think like this, and so forth and so on. You need to know as much as humanly possible about the people who want to buy or are buying the most of what you're selling. And that could just be ideas. It doesn't have to be a product or service, just could be ideas. People who are most likely to agree with those ideas and say, yes, that's right on. And when you do that and you're true to that, that's who you will have. We have the same demographic audience that we set out to get 25 years ago. We have the same demographic audience. Why? Because content is queen.
I love that, queen.
Is queen. And so whatever it is that you're putting out, basically that's what you're going to get. So doesn't it make sense to be certain who it is that you want to get, who can use the most of what you have to give? So if you can think like that, then those things begin to match up and more good things happen for you.
Fantastic. I agree with you 100%, because then that way they understand that they get it. You don't have to even explain it. Just like, with some people, so being able to do that. And also for us, the same thing, our market has been exactly the same. Women professionals and entrepreneurs. I think sometimes people feel they need to take this market and that market and that market. And again, Nan the other night said how she had one thing and she went all the way into the left side doing something else where it didn't work. So doesn't mean that you can't change your market. Doesn't mean that you have to be stuck with that for 25 years like you and I have been. But this means that there's so many things within that market. If that's where my heart is, if that's where your heart is speaking to those people, then there's so many different ways you can serve them. You can serve them again with all different products or programs and all services. So I
think you're the perfect example. I mean, you didn't have homework when you began. You added it. I asked you, why in the world did you add something? I mean, it seemed like it was so different, but really it's not different. It's really serving
my community.
A better way to serve the market that you were serving already. So naturally, when you figured, it's like you did a little more exploration and something occurred to you and you wanted to be of more service. So you added that, and it goes right along with everything else that you're doing. Yes, it takes more work. That's not the issue.
Right.
I mean, really what you were looking for is how,
I was looking for something that I was looking for personally. And I found out that other women in my age, my demographic, that were single or divorced, empty nesters, whatever, were looking for the same thing. And real estate has always been a part of my investment portfolio. So being able to combine them, it was a natural move. So ladies, think about, some of the things that you're doing already if you want to expand the markets, how you would do that, but also how you would speak to them and what medium you think. Also, when we talk about the videos and the written word and the podcasts and so forth, what does your audience listen to? What's easy for them? For me, I know, again, for me, podcast audio is easy because I can multitask like some of you are doing now. Some of you are multitasking, some of you are driving, some of you are doing different things, and you wouldn't be able to do that if it was only if you're reading something, you couldn't be reading and on the freeway at the same time. So for me, that this medium was the best. And then you can also have it transcribed for those who actually want to read more about it. She said she's going to come right back on. She's having problems. So get your questions ready. So now we're going to get some questions answered, and I'm going to prepare to stop when she gets back on. I'll prepare to stop the recording and let's ask some questions. Again, even just share some ideas. She's had a radio. Think about this. She's had a women's radio for, I think it was 15, 25 years. So a woman that owns a radio, and as large as it is and as powerful as it is, also Audio Acrobat. Again, Audio Acrobat was something that we used, and many of you who used it, she's the founder of it. So she knows a lot. So really just find a question that you can be able to take advantage of her expertise, her years of experience. Because you can talk to someone that owns a men's radio station or a TV station or whatever, you're going to get a different perspective. And because her audience has been our audience, I think it's really valuable.